Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. You're watching Eagle News International. Hello, CJ. Good to be back.
Hello, Alma. It's nice to be back. And good evening to everyone watching the news. Here are the headlines from around the world.
Thousands of anti-coup protesters march in Myanmar on Sunday calling for a spring revolution with the country in its fourth month under a military regime.
India's total COVID caseload neared 20 million on Monday as oxygen shortages in hospitals exacerbated a devastating second wave and much needed foreign assistance continued to pour in.
Scotland votes on Thursday to elect the national parliament with the ruling party seeking a green light for a fresh referendum on independence from the United Kingdom.
And after the successful splashdown of the SpaceX capsule with 4 astronauts from the International Space Station off the coast of Florida, NASA hailed at a press conference an incredible day.
First, to the ongoing crisis in Myanmar. A leading Myanmar ethnic rebel army said it had shot down a military helicopter on Monday, a day after a renewed junta crackdown on anti-coup protests left at least 5 civilians dead. The Kachin Independence Army, or KIA, said it downed the helicopter gunship during fierce clashes near the town of Momak in the country's far north. The KIA, which has waged a decades-long insurgency against the military in northern Kachin state, has been hit by airstrikes in recent weeks. AFP has tried to contact the Myanmar military to seek their account of the events, but has not had a response. A number of Myanmar's myriad ethnic rebel groups have come out in support of the anti-coup protest movement, offering shelter and even training to activists who have fled the crackdown. Clashes have ramped up in Karen State between the KNU's fighters and the military, which has responded with serious artillery power and airstrikes in towns next to the Thai border. Thai authorities said that the Myanmar military fired rocket offensives from the air to a KNU base on Saturday, and that gunfire could be heard from the kingdoms bordering Mae Hon Son province. Junta leader Min Aung Hlaing has justified the putsch by saying it was done to defend democracy, alleging electoral fraud in November's elections, which Suu Kyi's party won in a landslide. The ongoing violence in Myanmar has raised alarm among the international community.
Protesters marched in Myanmar Sunday, calling for a spring revolution with the country in its fourth month under a military regime. The demonstrations kicked off early in commercial hub Yangon as activists called for a show of force and a spring revolution. Youths gathered on a street corner before marching swiftly down the streets in a flash mob, dispersing soon after to avoid clashing with authorities. Urban centers have become hotspots for unrest, especially in Yangon, where residents share videos of security forces beating up civilians on the street. State-run newspaper Mirror Daily reported that a woman accused of supporting an underground parallel government opposing the junta was sentenced by military tribunal to 7 years in prison with hard labor. As the junta throttles communications and information, local journalists have also been targeted, and newsrooms have reacted by sending their staff into hiding. The Mitkina Journal, based in northern Kachin State, announced Sunday on Facebook it was ordered to shut down by the junta for publishing materials that were deemed against national security, rule of law, and stability.
In other news, President Duterte was vaccinated tonight, May 3, with the first dose of China's Sinopharm vaccine. In photos and a Facebook Live video posted by Senator Christopher Bongo, the 76-year-old Philippine leader is seen being vaccinated by Health Secretary Francisco Duque III just before 7 p.m. Senator Go said that President Duterte's doctors chose the vaccine Sinopharm for him. Senator Go said, according to Tatay Digo, as he calls him, he decided to get vaccinated not only to protect his health from COVID-19, but also to persuade our citizens to also get immunized. As a senior citizen, he is part of those prioritized to be vaccinated. Senator Go advised the public not to be scared of getting vaccinated. The Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, has earlier given a compassionate use license for Sinopharm vaccines for the PSG members. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque in February said that President Duterte could be vaccinated with Sinopharm, citing the compassionate use and license. President Duterte had repeatedly said before that getting the vaccine was the only way for Filipinos to beat the pandemic.
Okay. Ready po. Okay. Ready.
In other news, India's total COVID caseload neared 20 million today as oxygen shortages in hospitals exacerbated a devastating second wave, and much needed foreign assistance continued to pour in. The federal and state authorities have been scrambling to get extra oxygen to hospitals, including by sourcing it from industry and sending special oxygen express trains. Foreign assistance has also been pouring in, including from Germany and France, which this weekend sent medical equipment, including oxygen generating plants. India's underfunded healthcare system is under severe strain, with fatal shortages of beds, drugs, and oxygen, leaving some to die awaiting treatment in long queues outside hospitals in capital New Delhi and other cities. 24 people died in one hospital overnight on Sunday in the southern state of Karnataka after the hospital ran out of oxygen, according to press reports and sources, though the district administration denied that shortages had caused the deaths. Another 12 died on Saturday in a hospital in the capital New Delhi after it ran out of oxygen, according to reports. Several hospitals sent out desperate appeals for oxygen on social media overnight, with deliveries arriving only in the nick of time.
A devastating surge in coronavirus infections has exposed India's dilapidated health infrastructure and a deep shortage of medical oxygen. Experts have for years raised the alarm about shortages of oxygen in India and other poor countries. But the extra strain caused by COVID-19 has led to a catastrophic situation. The World Health Organization estimates 1 person in 5 suffering from COVID-19 needs oxygen as an essential part of their treatment. With cases surging around the world, advocates are warning other countries with chronic shortages may be at risk for a repeat of an India-like situation. Take a look.
कभी इस अस्पताल कभी उस अस्पताल इतना बुरा हाल कभी नहीं देखा था मैंने।
इक्विपमेंट ढूंढने के लिए भी मुझे 2-3 घंटे लगे, जब जाके मुझे उसका वो मास्क और उसकी पाइप मिली जिससे ऑक्सीजन लेते हैं। उसके बाद डॉक्टर कोई नहीं है, ना कोई अटेंडेंट मिल पा रहा है, ना कुछ मिल पा रहा है। जो आस पड़ोस के डॉक्टर है वो भी कोरोना पॉजिटिव है और कोई वो है ही नहीं, ना कहीं से मदद है कि हम किसी को ले जा सकें। अपना यूट्यूब पे देख के दूसरे किसी से फ़ोन पर पता करके ऑक्सीजन लेवल क्या रखना है क्या नहीं रखना बड़ी मुश्किल से हो रहा है।
यार ऑक्सीमीटर पकड़ेगा कहीं तक बस जा We are searching oxygen all over India, all over Delhi to Chandigarh, Ludhiana, Haridwar, Jaipur and all our nearby cities from 200-400 kilometers far. All our vehicles are on the roads who are searching the oxygen.
We have also faced these struggles where 2 hours, 3 hours worth of oxygen is left, and we are scampering at 1 a.m. in the night, trying to figure out what would be the best possible options. And obviously, you feel at the end of it, you feel that you are responsible for those lives which are, at stake in the absence of that oxygen. Want to save as many people as possible. You not having the resources to be able to do that is something which is, leaves a bad taste. It leaves a lot of pain and it hurts.
Everybody forgot oxygen. It was a complete blind spot at the global level. I think it's because people took for granted that these hospitals had it. People in the north, not realising, not knowing that it simply wasn't available in many hospitals. So it was a real blind spot, and it's now that the people of India who are paying the price for that.
Que estoy esperando para que me puedan vender una bombón y rogando a Dios que cuando llegue a la casa todavía esté respirando, que no doten de oxígeno. Si no hay hospital, yo lo puedo entender, hay mucha gente, pero dame oxígeno, dame recursos, dame medicina. Necesitamos ayuda, necesitamos que nos ayuden.
The good thing about oxygen, though, is it's not in short supply. And the big industrial gas, the big companies that make the oxygen say there actually isn't a constraint on supply. They can move it quickly, they can generate it. So this is the kind of the one sort of silver lining is we can keep providing oxygen as long as the financing is in place. Turkey, Brazil, Argentina, Iraq, Colombia, Ukraine, the Philippines, Peru, and the countries bordering India. Please watch these countries, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal. In recent days, we're following them on the tracker and they're all showing spikes in oxygen need. If what's happening in India starts to move out into neighbouring countries, we could have a massive problem in particularly the high population South Asia countries. I think after what they're seeing in India right now, they will never question again the need for oxygen as a basic medicine that every health system needs to have.
In other COVID news, Pakistan has closed land crossings with Iran and Afghanistan for travelers and slashed international flights as the government warned of a critical few weeks ahead in the battle against COVID-19. The border restrictions were announced Sunday as the country prepared to mark the Muslim holiday of Eid al-Fitr, which usually sees the mass movement of people between cities and villages, as well as the return of migrant workers and overseas Pakistanis for celebrations. Pakistani officials have anxiously watched the coronavirus crisis unfolding in neighboring India. The Civil Aviation Authority said Saturday that from Wednesday, 80% of flights would be suspended for 2 weeks, mainly from the Middle East, until mid-May when the Eid holidays are over. Foot crossings with Iran and Afghanistan would also be sealed, the country's coronavirus task force said, adding that trade would be exempt. Impoverished Pakistan is struggling to contain a third wave of infections with more than 800,000 cases and 18,000 deaths declared.
Meanwhile, Taiwan will suspend from Tuesday, May 4, the entry of people who have been to India. Over the previous 14 days, Health Minister Chen Shih-chung said the latest place to enforce curbs on travel from the coronavirus-battered India. Except for Taiwan citizens, all those who had been in India in the prior 14 days would be kept out, according to Mr. Chen, on Monday, with the restriction taking effect at midnight. Returning Taiwanese will have to spend 14 days in centralized quarantine facilities. The Indian variant of the virus has reached at least 17 countries, including Britain, Iran, and Switzerland, spurring several to close their borders to those traveling from India.
Meanwhile, the COVAX Global Vaccine Equity Program said Monday it has struck a deal to buy 500 million doses of Moderna's COVID-19 jabs. The doses, to come on stream from October at the earliest, will broaden out the portfolio of vaccines in the COVAX scheme, which has so far been heavily reliant on the AstraZeneca vaccine and hit by delays. The Moderna doses are expected to start supplying COVAX in the final quarter of 2021, with 34 million doses available before the end of the year, the COVAX scheme's co-leader Gavi announced in a statement. A further 466 million doses will follow in 2022. The COVAX facility ensures access to jabs in poor countries with the cost covered by donors. Wealthier countries can bulk buy through the scheme.
In other news, thousands of ultra-Orthodox Jews attended the funerals for 2 young victims of a stampede that killed 45 people at a Jewish pilgrimage site. 18-year-old Yosef David Elahad and 12-year-old Mosh Mordeshan Elahad. Take a look.
Yosef David! לא הכרתי אותך, אני מבקש אותך מהחילה. כל הזמן צמצמתי אותך, רצית להישאר לילות שלמים. לא רצית להפסיק ללמוד. הייתי אומר לך, לא, תלך
לא אמרתי טוב עד אתמול, אבל תפסיק להיות חסר רגישות.
אני במשך 20 שנה נסעתי כל שנה למירון, לל"ג בעומר. באחד השנים אני גם הייתי בכזה מפולת של אנשים ונמחצתי שם בין האנשים. זה היה הרגע הכי מפחיד בחיים שלי, ומאז לא חזרתי יותר.
Eagle News will be right back.
This portion is brought to you by Canriv Corporation, your ventilation and air conditioning specialist. Services offered: supply and installation of elevators, escalators, air conditioners, ventilators, jet towel, hand dryers, generators, access control system, factory automation, and modernization. For more info, please contact Ami Kanke at 0915-263-7198 or 0998-900-3224.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back to the news. EBC Bureau Chief in Canada, Thomas Likeness, tells us who gets critical care once hospitals reach full capacity. Thomas.
This is a grim task that healthcare professionals hope they never have to perform. It's called triage. It's a system set up to classify patients to determine who will get life-saving care when there are limited resources. Hospitals in their critical care units in two of Canada's hardest-hit provinces are quickly reaching capacity. With COVID variants infecting people at record levels, Ontario and Alberta have released their triage plans. In Ontario, patients are assigned one of four colors: red, purple, yellow, or green, depending on the likelihood of their surviving for 1 year. Red patients have the lowest chance of survival, less than 20%. Green patients have a 70% or greater chance of living another 12 months. The survival chances of the two other colors are in between. Now, under this system, green patients are the first in line for ICU beds, then yellow, purple, and red. Alberta's plan is somewhat different. I had a chance to go through the 51-page document. In Phase 1, where 90% of the province's ICU beds are occupied, only those with a 20% or greater chance of surviving for 1 year would be admitted to critical care. Anything less means the patient would get palliative care. Phase 2 kicks in if 95% of ICU beds are occupied. Then patients would have to have a 50% or greater chance of surviving for 12 months to be eligible for critical care. Pediatric cases in Alberta are only subject to triage during Phase 2. The triage plans have a number of people concerned. Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Hinshaw, says she understands that people are apprehensive when they hear that medical care may have to be rationed.
These protocols are a last resort and can seem scary, but it is important that this work be undertaken as a precaution and that the necessary healthcare professionals have an understanding of what these protocols mean. This is the work that my AHS colleagues have been undertaking over the past year. We are not at the point now of needing to use this protocol, and I hope that we never reach it.
Dr. Hinshaw, how long before we have to triage patients?
The bottom line is that our health system has capacity and can take steps to increase it, but the strain is growing. That is why we must bend down the curve as quickly as possible.
Here's hoping that people here get the message and do what it takes to control the spread of this virus. We've seen what's happened in other countries where the virus has spun out of control. In Edmonton, Canada, Thomas Likeness, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
To other news now, El Salvador's new Legislative Assembly voted Saturday to dismiss top Supreme Court judges hostile to populist President Nayib Bukele, triggering a political storm as the opposition derided the move as a coup. Take a listen.
Votación, 94 votos a favor, queda destituido como fiscal general de la República el abogado del licenciado Raúl Ernesto Melara queda electo como fiscal general de la República el abogado Rodolfo Antonio Delgado Montes.
The lawmakers also voted to dismiss Attorney General Raul Melara, considered close to an opposition party. Bukele's New Ideas party holds an absolute majority following February elections. At its first session on Saturday, the Assembly dismissed all the justices of the Supreme Court's constitutional chamber for issuing arbitrary judgments. The ousted judges, whose replacements were immediately appointed by the majority legislators, refused to leave their posts, citing the unconstitutionality of the decree of dismissal. U.S. officials criticized the move and warned it could harm relations with Washington. A group of 25 Salvadoran civil society organizations condemned what they said was a coup d'etat endorsed by President Bukele with the aim of centralizing all power in only one person. Bukele is popular in some quarters for his stated desire to fight organized crime. He has sought to cultivate an image as a man of the people in a country where the traditional parties are widely viewed as corrupt. He's also seen by some as a defender of the poor. Allies of Bukele now hold 61 of 84 seats in parliament, making him the first president in nearly 3 decades to have a majority in the legislature. But critics have warned about authoritarian risks.
In other news, Scotland votes on Thursday to elect the National Parliament, with the ruling party seeking a green light for a fresh referendum on independence from the United Kingdom. The election for the 129 members of the Scottish Parliament to serve for the next 5 years has reignited the debate on whether the country of 5.5 million would be better off on its own. Take a look.
So we're fed up of right-wing Tory governments' policies which we don't agree with, and the Brexit vote was icing on the cake, yeah.
So now is time to take a stance, and hopefully, with everybody being locked up in their own home, in their own space for so long, now's the time to move forward. It can only but try.
So really, we have to get a parliament on Thursday that's got as many pro-independence MSPs as possible, and then really what we should be doing is forging ahead for our own, self-determination, for our own referendum. It would be legal, it would be constitutional. We don't need the permission from Westminster. The thing is, I think they know that, and they're just posturing. We need Nicola Sturgeon to actually deliver a referendum. Whether that happens or not, but we'll be pushing her to do that.
Scotland is a bold, like this city, is bold and it's confident in its ability to become independent and take its place amongst the rest of the nations in the world.
Westminster takes Scotland so far in the wrong direction that we no longer have the...
That would mean there will be no democratic, electoral, or moral justification for UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson to block a referendum, Sturgeon said this week. But opinion polls suggest the SNP may not achieve an outright majority and could seek a pro-independence coalition. 55% of Scots voted no to independence in 2014, which Johnson has described as a once-in-a-generation poll. A Savanta Comra survey this week indicated 49% of Scots would vote no in an immediate referendum and 42% yes. Supporters of IndyRef 2 argue Brexit has radically changed the situation, with Scotland's fishing and farming sectors hard hit. They also cite Sturgeon's strong leadership during the pandemic. The SNP says independence will create a fairer, more prosperous nation and wants independent Scotland to rejoin the European Union. But parties that want to stay in the UK fear another vote would hurt post-pandemic recovery.
New Zealand will open a travel bubble with the tiny Cook Islands this month, adopting a quarantine-free arrangements similar to those already established with Australia. That according to Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. Ardern said the bubble with the South Pacific island state of about 20,000 people would open on May 17 and initially involve about 3 flights a week.
So it gives me great pleasure today to be able to announce that on the 17th of May, on the basis that a clear set of criteria is met, this arrangement will come into effect. The Cook Islands are in a stronger position to prevent, detect and manage any potential COVID-19 outbreak, which means a two-way travel bubble can now proceed. A green travel zone between the Cooks and New Zealand will allow families to reconnect, commercial arrangements to resume, and tourism in the Cooks to kick off once again. This will all provide a boost to the Cook Islands economy and help in the country's recovery from the impacts of COVID-19.
The remote Cook Islands is one of few places in the world to remain coronavirus-free, while New Zealand has eliminated community transmission and recorded only 25 deaths in a population of 5 million. The Cook Islands is self-governing in free association with New Zealand, meaning that while it administers its own affairs, Cook Islanders are both New Zealand citizens and Cook Islands nationals. As a result, there are more expatriate Cook Islanders living in New Zealand than on the islands.
Meanwhile, the European Union's executive on Monday proposed that travelers who are fully vaccinated with EU-approved jabs be able to enter the bloc, according to a statement. The EU currently has 4 vaccines currently authorized by its European Medicines Agency from BioNTech, Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, and Johnson & Johnson. Proof that an individual was fully vaccinated at least 2 weeks before arriving in the EU for full immunity to kick in would not exclude member states also requiring COVID tests either before or after arrival, or quarantine if authorities deemed warranted. The proposal also says an emergency brake option should be kept in reserve to allow member states to quickly close travel from countries where a variant of concern or interest is detected. The EU at the moment recommends a general ban on travelers entering the bloc, except for those on essential business, and most member states are respecting this rule. Just 6 countries, Australia, New Zealand, Rwanda, Singapore, South Korea, and Thailand, are on an EU list permitting member states to gradually lift travel restrictions on travelers coming from them. Their figures show COVID infections are under control. China is on that list too, but travel restrictions will be eased only if it reciprocates and permits arrivals from the EU, which is not the case at the moment.
The city government of Manila received on Monday its share of 3,000 doses of Sputnik V jabs from the national government. The Russian-made vaccines were delivered straight to the city's storage facility at the Santa Ana Hospital. Mayor Francisco Isko Moreno Domagoso, Vice Mayor Hani Laguna, and Manila Health Department Acting Chief Dr. Arnold Pangan received the delivery. A total of 15,000 Sputnik V jabs arrived in the country on Saturday. Taguig, Makati, Parañaque, and Muntinlupa will also get 3,000 doses each for the pilot rollout. Medical frontliners who have not received their COVID-19 vaccines yet will be prioritized for the Sputnik V jabs, which touts a 91.6% efficacy. After 2 or 3 days, the city government will next offer the vaccine to individuals in the A2, senior citizens, and the A3, persons with comorbidities age 80 to 50 priority lists. Domagoso said the Sputnik V vaccines will be initially administered at the Santa Ana Hospital and Hospital ng Maynila.
Greek restaurants and cafes reopened their terraces on Monday after 6 months of pandemic shutdown, with customers flocking to soak up the sunshine and a return to, quote, normal life. Greece has been under COVID-19 restrictions, including a curfew of varying strictness, since November. The third wave of the pandemic has hit Greece particularly hard, with a majority of the country's nearly 10,000 virus deaths occurring over the last few months. Non-essential businesses and schools reopened in early April. Some 330,000 people are estimated to work in the restaurant sector in Greece, and on Monday, only cafes and restaurants with outdoor seating were permitted to reopen.
Here in the country, the Department of National Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana dismissed claims that his recent statements on the Chinese incursions in the West Philippine Sea are not aligned with those of President Duterte. Let's listen in.
We can be cordial and cooperative with other nations, but not at the expense of our sovereignty and sovereign rights. While we acknowledge that China's military capability is more advanced than ours, this does not prevent us from defending our national interest.
In a statement to reporters on Sunday, he said the chief executive's orders to the Defense Department regarding the West Philippine Sea have been very firm and straightforward, and that is to defend the country's possessions without going to war. And as part of the Philippines' long-standing and multifaceted relationship with China, he said both nations maintain cooperation in various areas that are mutually beneficial to the Filipino and Chinese people. Earlier, Lorenzana said China has no legal Philippines from conducting maritime exercises in the West Philippine Sea. This came following China's calls to stop the ongoing maritime exercises of the Philippine Coast Guard and the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, noting that such actions are complicating the situation and escalating the disputes. UNCLOS, he said, gave the Philippines sovereign rights to explore the natural resources of an area that is 200 nautical miles away from the mainland.
At least 26 people were killed when a speedboat packed with passengers collided with a vessel transporting sand on Monday in the latest maritime disaster to hit Bangladesh. Police said the speedboat, carrying about 36 passengers from the town of Mawa, rammed into the other vessel in the Padma River as it neared the main river station in the central rural town of Shibkar. Authorities said the bow of the passenger boat was destroyed when the speedboat smashed into the side of the transport vessel, sinking in the river in minutes. The government administrator of Shibkar district said up to 5 people were believed to be missing. He said the driver of the speedboat would be investigated as he appeared to have hit the transport vessel, which was moored at that time.
Sydney was enveloped in a thick bank of hazardous bushfire smoke Monday, forcing authorities in Australia's largest city to scale back controlled forest burning nearby. Ferries were cancelled and the city's 5 million residents were told to stay indoors if necessary as air pollution levels spiked. Levels of hazardous PM 2.5 pollution particles that can seep deep into the lungs and cause respiratory illnesses were among the worst in the world at more than 190 on the Air Quality Index. Australia's fire services regularly try to carry out hazard reduction burning outside summer months, clearing the forest floors of debris that can fuel wildfires. But they were forced to scale back plans for further burns Monday as pollution reached hazardous levels, and some union groups told workers to drop tools if the smoke was too much. Climate change is believed to be making fire seasons longer and more dangerous, as well as limiting the time frame when controlled burns can be carried out safely.
Now, after the successful splashdown of the SpaceX capsule with 4 astronauts from the International Space Station off the coast of Florida, NASA hailed at a press conference an incredible day. Take a look.
An incredible day today, recovering Mike Hopkins, Victor Glover, Suichi Noguchi, and Shannon Walker after their 168 days in space. It really has been an incredible 27 days, I would say, for the NASA and SpaceX teams.
I think that's Mike Hopkins, the commander. He's really excited.
Feeling pretty good after 6 months in space.
This is just excellent. On top of the Dragon.
The capsule splashed down at 2:56 a.m. or 6:56 GMT in the dark in the Gulf of Mexico off Panama City after a 6.5-hour flight from the ISS. Night vision images relayed by NASA's WB-57 high-altitude research aircraft showed. Commander Michael Hopkins was the first to emerge after the hatch was opened, doing a little jig as he set foot on deck, followed shortly after by fellow NASA astronaut Victor Glover. Teams aboard the Go Navigator recovery ship retrieved the capsule and hoisted it onto the deck about half an hour later. It was the first nighttime splashdown for NASA since the crew of Apollo 8 arrived in the Pacific Ocean on December 27, 1968. The 4 astronauts went to space last November as the crew on the first fully operational mission to the ISS aboard a vehicle made by Elon Musk's SpaceX, which has become NASA's favorite commercial transportation partner. NASA said they traveled 71.2 million miles, or about 114.6 billion kilometers, during their 168 days in orbit, including 167 days aboard the space station. 7 astronauts remained on the ISS, including a new crew of 4 who arrived on a different SpaceX craft last week. Eagle News will be back with more updates. Please don't go away.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Your weekly dose of entrepreneurial inspiration to update you on the latest developments in the world of business. Get up close and personal with CEOs and thought leaders to help you discover valuable insights. Sharpen your instincts for smart decision-making with the latest markets and economic trends, disruptive ideas, global innovation, social entrepreneurship, and other leading-edge business ideas. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business, from vision to action.
Hong Kong's economy jumped back into growth in the first quarter of the year, according to official figures showing this on Monday, ending the city's most pronounced period of recession in its modern history. The international financial hub has been battered last 18 months by a triple whammy of the U.S.-China trade war, months of social unrest, and then the coronavirus pandemic. In 2019, months of huge and often violent pro-democracy protests coincided with swirling trade tensions between Beijing and the U.S., pummeling the economy that acts as an international gateway to China. It recorded 6 consecutive quarters of negative growth, a more prolonged downturn than during both the 1997 Asian financial crisis and the 2007 to 2008 global crash. That came to an end on Monday when the government announced the economy grew 7.8% on year in the first 3 months of 2020, and this year's economic rebound was largely sparked by a sharp resurgence in exports, fueled by recoveries in both China and the U.S. Financial Secretary Paul Chan has forecast full-year growth of 3.5 to 5.5% in 2021. But the city has warned that the economy remains below its pre-pandemic levels and the recovery will be uneven.
In other news, Britain this week hosts the first face-to-face meeting of G7 foreign ministers in 2 years, joined by U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken as world powers tackle pandemic recovery plus growing tensions with Russia and China. The day before G7 foreign and development ministers meet in person for the first time in 2 years in London, British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab says discussions will include building a constructive relationship with China and defending Western values in matters of intellectual property theft and human rights. Take a look.
Want a constructive relationship with China, but on things, whether it's intellectual property theft or standing up for human rights in Hong Kong and Xinjiang, obviously we're going to be very clear on our values. And on Russia as well, I think we've seen, obviously with the Novichok attack and the imprisonment of Alexei Navalny, the saber rattling on the border with Ukraine, in all of these areas, we want to be absolutely firm and standing shoulder to shoulder, not just with Americans, as important as they are, but also with our wider allies. That's why the G7 is so important. Well, we're doing a couple of things. So we're giving £8 million to the BBC to help them counter misinformation, including from Russia. But we're also getting the G7 to come together with a rapid rebuttal mechanism so that when we see these lies or propaganda or fake news being put out there, we can not just individually but come together to provide a rebuttal and, frankly, to provide the truth for the people in this country, but also in Russia, China, and all around the world.
U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said in an interview that aired Sunday that an increasingly powerful China is challenging the world order, acting more repressively and more aggressively as it flexes its influence. In an interview with CBS's 60 Minutes, Blinken said China is the one country in the world that has the military, economic, diplomatic capacity to undermine or challenge the rules-based order that we care so much about and are determined to defend. He said, quote, "But I want to be very clear about something. Our purpose is not to contain China, to hold it back, to keep it down. It is to uphold the rules-based order that China is posing a challenge to."
The Indian Premier League was forced into its first coronavirus postponement this season on Monday after 2 players tested positive despite the tournament's biosecure bubble. The Kolkata Knight Riders match against Virat Kohli's Royal Challengers Bangalore was called off just hours before it starts in Ahmedabad after Varun Chakravarti and Sandeep Warrior became infected. The league set up biosecure bubbles around the 8 teams before the tournament as a devastating wave of cases swept across India. Media reports said the pair may have been infected when they left their team hotel for injury checkups. All IPL games so far have been held behind closed doors, but after 3 Australian players left the tournament last week, organizers sought to reassure the remaining foreign stars that they are totally safe. Adam Zampa, Andrew Tai, and Kane Richardson left their before on arrivals from
In other news, Britain's Prince Harry joined pop royalty, including Jennifer Lopez, at a star-studded concert in Los Angeles Sunday to urge faster and more even global vaccinations as he voiced support for India during its devastating COVID outbreak. Vax Live, the concert to reunite the world, featured video messages from the Pope and President Joe Biden and in-person appearances from Hollywood stars such as Ben Affleck and Sean Penn. The show will air on television and YouTube on May 8 after being pre-taped in front of thousands of fully vaccinated spectators at a vast California stadium on Sunday. Quote, "Tonight we stand in solidarity with the millions of families across India who are battling a devastating second wave," end quote. That's Prince Harry saying that, who was greeted with a standing ovation. "The virus does not respect borders, and access to the vaccine cannot be determined by geography," added Harry, making his first in-person appearance at a major public event in California since moving last year to the United States with wife Meghan Markle, who did not appear at that event. Organizers said the event had surpassed its fundraising goal needed to purchase 10 million vaccine doses for low and middle income countries, drawing more than $53 million in donations from corporations and philanthropists. In pre-taped messages, President Biden said he was working with leaders around the world to share more vaccines to boost production. The concert, organized by Global Citizen, an international advocacy organization, aims to battle vaccine disinformation while calling on world leaders and corporations to take action and make donations. The concert will stream on YouTube along with American television networks ABC and CBS on May 8 at 8 p.m. Eastern Time or midnight GMT.
And finally, in our news, Toronto Food Kitchen receives aid from the Iglesia ni Cristo. Here's April Masongsong for more.
Hunger has always been a global issue, even before the COVID-19 pandemic. More so now that the economy is down and millions have lost their jobs due to the COVID-19 crisis. 5 and 2 Kitchen, a soup kitchen and food bank here in Toronto, Canada, has written to the Felix Y. Manila Foundation to seek their assistance in providing food support for marginalized communities in the city. To prepare for this campaign, members of the Church of Christ collected food donations from their members for a week. 312 boxes of food were prepared, amounting to 9,360 pounds of food items. On top of the food donations, the Church of Christ also donated $5,000 in cash donation to further help 5 and 2 Kitchens.
I want to thank Executive Minister Eduardo V. Manolo. I believe God had his hand on this mission, and you responded in an amazing way, and you gave a directive to your district minister here in Toronto. And in the short space of 2 weeks, the congregation here answered the call, and they've collected this amazing amount of food supplies to help us at 5 and 2 to be able to support our more needy communities around us. There are so many marginalized families here in Toronto that fall into the cracks because they don't speak up about the poverty they're facing, and especially at these times when they're isolated and at high risk of exposure. The supplies that you have enabled your congregation to gather for us is tremendous, and I think maybe for the rest of this year we likely will not have to buy certain supplies because your congregation has brought it together to us. And so I want to thank you again for this, and I pray God will guide you, give you wisdom and understanding as you continue to do His work in the many countries that you are carrying these ministries to. Thank you very much.
Indeed, food stability may be a rarity these days, but the Felix Y. Manila Foundation is proof that generosity and community will never be scarce, even in times of a global pandemic. In Toronto, April Masongsong, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Always there to help.
Always there to help. I actually had a meeting with Taguig City Mayor Lino Cayetano earlier today, and he wants to send his thanks to the Church of Christ or the Iglesia ni Cristo for the help that they, the food packs that they sent to the city for those who do not have food at this time.
Oh, great news.
Well, that's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Hero. Glad to be back. Please join us again tomorrow.
And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.